Grab your text and go to Romans 3 today, Romans chapter 3. I know some of you, by default, your Bible just like falls open to John, but we're going to hit the pause button on John for a few weeks, and we're doing a series today called Flip the Script. That will be in for about 6 weeks. And so go to Romans chapter 3 today is the text that we are going to be unpacking. This is one of my favorite texts in all of Scripture. I hope that you own a copy of the Bible. If you do not, we would love to give you one as a gift. Just stop by down at the table in the foyer. We'd love to give you a copy of God's Word. I always encourage you to bring the Bible to church. We teach the Bible, preach the Bible here, and I want you to hear what the Bible has to say. So we'll get into our text in just a moment. First of all, I wanted to bring up one of our adopted family members at the Hudson house. Oh, he did just a natural salute. I didn't even make that happen. This is Buzz Lightyear. How many of you know Buzz? Okay. So Buzz is a special part of the Hudson family. I have to tell you that Toy Story has been a part of our family for a lot of years. The original Toy Story came out in 1995. Kaylee, my oldest daughter, was born in 1997. So from very early on, Toy Story has been a part of our family. Reagan's very first movie, Kaylee's very first movie was Toy Story 2. Reagan owned a little Wheezy doll, which is one of the less popular characters of Toy Story, but the one that she loved. And she would take Wheezy to see Toy Story when we would go to see it. We all went to watch Toy Story 3, which was supposed to be the last one, even though they pulled the wool over our eyes and did a fourth one that's coming out this year. We're revolting against that. But we all shed tears at the end of Toy Story 3. We felt like it was a part of our family that was going away. And now Levi has come along, and the only thing the kid wants to have anything to do is Buzz and Woody. And so when it's his time to be able to watch TV, Levi, what do you want to watch? Buzz Woody. Do you want to watch Sesame Street? No, Buzz Woody. Do you want to watch Paw Patrol? No, Buzz Woody. Do you want to watch, whatever you name, he's coming back to Buzz Woody. And now he wants to watch the one where the train, it's Toy Story 3, the train goes off. So now he says, Buzz Woody choo-choo. Buzz Woody choo-choo. That's all he wants to watch. He carries his little Buzz, he carries his Woody around. Zach owned a Buzz. He had Buzz pajamas. We've all been a part of the Toy Story. He still has Toy Story pajamas, I think. I'm talking about Zach now. But we've all been a part of the Toy Story dynasty. Now, what does that have to do with what we're talking about today? If you know the original storyline of Toy Story, you know that when Buzz comes into the movie, he is 100% fully persuaded that he is a true and genuine space ranger. He's not a toy. He's a space ranger. And for the most of the first movie, he believes with all of his heart that he's a space ranger. It's not until they're in their chief nemesis house, Sid, who's the kid that wants to destroy all toys. And we all know a Sid. We all have a Sid. Some of you were Sid. You blew your toys up and all those fun things. I'm not saying I was Sid, but I have some similarities to Sid, I have to say, when I was a little kid. And so when he's in Sid's house and they're trying to get away, Buzz sees a commercial on TV and realizes what Woody's been trying to persuade him the entire movie. You are a toy! To which Buzz replies, and you are a sad little man. Buzz was a toy. And when he discovers he's a toy, he climbs up on the ledge to see if he can fly, right? Pops his little wings out, and he jumps off the ledge. Looks like he's going to make it, and then what happens? I'm not going to drop this because he might break, and then Levi would be upset. But he falls down the stairwell, arm breaks off. He realizes they were right all along. I am nothing but a toy. And it changed everything about him, about how he approached life, everything he did. He thought he was a space ranger, but now he is nothing but a toy. What a sad moment for Buzz Lightyear to realize he was nothing but a toy. And there's a dramatic shift that happens in the Toy Story story when he realizes he was not what he thought he was or what he believed he was. We're starting a series today called Flip the Script. It is a series based on one of the favorite phrases of the early gospel preachers and writers of Scripture, a phrase that is very simple for us, but two very strategic words, the words, but now. Say those two words with me, but now. Say them again, but now. And so we'll see what these words mean, what they mean in the text, the stark contrast that these two words highlight in our spiritual lives. They are dramatic, eternity-shaping, life-transforming words that show the shift that takes place in the life of men, women, boys, and girls who are made alive in Jesus. And those words from the earliest days of the church forward have been very significant. See, every one of you that is a follower of Jesus today, you have a but now story. You have a story where you were something before Jesus, but now, in Jesus, you are something else. We all have a but now story. Some of you have but now stories where you had a marriage that was on the rocks, but now, in Jesus, through Jesus, you have a marriage that's thriving and becoming all that God intended. Some of you had some type of addiction issue that before Jesus you were struggling with this, but now in Jesus you're finding victory over that. Some of you have had other issues in your life that before Jesus were one way. We have all, as followers of Jesus, had this eternal but now moment of what we were before Christ and now who we are in Christ. And what's important to know is this seismic shift did not take place among the earliest followers of Jesus because they received some type of new spiritual insight. It's not because they had a religious awakening. It's not because they read the latest kind of self-help book. People in the earliest days of the church abandoned their former way of living, their former way of thinking, their former way of believing, and they followed Jesus because of the explosive good news that they heard and experienced firsthand. Their lives were transformed because they watched Jesus die, they watched Jesus be raised back to life, and their lives were forever changed. And a movement was birthed that would shape all of humanity. And it's the reason we're sitting in the seats at City Church today. Because of the dramatic shift that took place when people watched Jesus die and be raised back to life. And all of that is brought in this little single phrase, but now. This radical life transformation is embodied in these two simple but revolutionary words, but now. They are the same two words which continue to define the before and after reality of what it means to follow Jesus. And so in this series, we're going to look at key passages that describe this before and after impact of the gospel. Now, before and after, that's a common thing that you see today. A lot of times it has to do with the way you look or appear physically, right? So you see commercials on TV before and after. You know, I was this size before I went on Nutrisystem and ate everything I possibly wanted to eat, and in the process lost 75 pounds, right? That's kind of the commercial vibe. Eat whatever you want to eat and lose weight in the process. We have a few ladies in our church that are involved in some type of skincare product before and after is often things I see posted about the way people look before and after. I think before and after is really the German words for rodent and field. Is that what it is? Only a few of you get that. Before and after, based on this person looked like they were 95 years old before they started using this, and now they look 12. It's amazing. Before and after. Or we'll see it associated with surgeries and other things like that. The before and after of the world in which we live. This series is about before and after, but it's about before Jesus and after Jesus. I heard a story, the before and after story. This is an old joke I don't tell very often, but it's a classic, so I'll tell it. There's this older guy that only had lived on the farm his entire life and never been to the big city. So late in his life, he decided his son had grown up and become a successful businessman that lived in the Big Apple in New York City. So as a surprise, he took his older father, who had only been on the farms his entire life in the Delta South, and took him to New York City. The man had never seen any technology, had never seen big cities, never seen anything in big cities. He had only lived on the farm his entire life. And so here he is with his son in New York City. Never seen an elevator before, so they're standing at this building wanting to go up where he can show him the skyline of New York City, and they're watching what takes place. And this older gentleman sees these doors opening and closing, people getting on and off. He sees this really elderly lady come up, slowly make her way. Elevator opens, she gets on, elevator doors close. A couple of minutes later, elevator doors open, and this beautiful model-like lady gets off the elevator. Old man starts scratching his head, hits the sign and says, "Son, I don't know what that is, but go get your ma and run her through there a few times." The before and after. We're talking about before and after Jesus. And we're starting in Romans chapter 3. This has been labeled by one New Testament scholar as possibly the most important paragraph ever written. Let me put it in context for you. From chapter 1, verse 18 of the book of Romans to chapter 3 and verse 20, before we get into the text, here's basically what Paul has done. Paul has described the human predicament. And here's the summary of the human predicament. Every single human being who has ever lived, of every race, of every tribe, of every status, of every culture, Jews and Gentiles, immoral and moral, religious and irreligious, unrighteous and self-righteous, every human, without any exception, is sinful, guilty, inexcusable, and speechless before God. That's the summary of the first 3 chapters of Romans. Every person who has ever existed, of any tribe, any nation, any race, any religion, good religious people, non-religious people, they are all guilty. They are all without excuse before God. As a matter of fact, here I love his summary words in chapter 3 and verse 19. Before we get to 21, look what Paul says in 3:19. Now we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law, so that, listen to this, every mouth may be stopped and the whole world may be held accountable to God. You know what Paul's saying to his audience? Shut your pie hole, you're guilty before God. That's what he says. He says, close your mouth. May all of our mouths be stopped. You are guilty. You are accountable to God. But Devin, I'm a really good person. May all our mouths be stopped because we are guilty and inexcusable before a holy God. John Stott says here is where that leaves us. No ray of light, no flicker of hope, no prospect of rescue. It is an utterly dark picture of our sinfulness and our spiritual condition. We are all deserving of God's wrath. Let's be dismissed. I'm just kidding. That's the bad news, right? The condemnation side of salvation. That we all stand before God guilty and condemned. That's why the words, but now, are so important. Because that's where Paul takes us next. What follows that human predicament, what follows our guilt, our shame, our condemnation, Paul begins to say in verse 21, but now. I've told you the bad news. I've told you your spiritual condition, but now. What follows these 2 pivotal words in this text is the difference in life and death, hope and despair, salvation and condemnation, rescue and judgment. So we're going to dive in and unpack the heart and center of the entire book of Romans, which is Romans chapter 3, 21 through 26. So let's read that text, and then we'll come back individual verses and break it down for you. So Romans chapter 3, beginning verse 21. But now, the righteousness of God has been manifested apart from the law, although the law and the prophets bear witness to it. The righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe. For there is no distinction. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and are justified. That word means to be declared right with God. And justified by His grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus, whom God put forward as a propitiation. That's a big theology word. It basically has to do with the atonement. When the blood of the lamb was spilled, it would cover the sins of the people. The word atonement means to cover. The propitiation, it means to appease God's wrath. When he was put forward as a propitiation by His blood to be received by faith. This was to show God's righteousness, because in his divine forbearance, that means mercy or patience, he has passed over former sins. It was to show his righteousness at the present time so that he might be just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. So let's unpack what Paul has to say in Romans chapter 3. We'll go through it a verse at a time. So back again to verse 21. But now, there's our key phrase, but now the righteousness of God has been revealed apart from the law, although the prophets and prophets bear witness to it. So this verse, 21, Paul is basically saying this: the saving righteousness of God is made available. The saving righteousness of God has been revealed, but it's been revealed apart from law-keeping, law-abiding, rules-keeping. In other words, here's what Paul's saying. A shift has taken place. A new covenant has been ushered in through Jesus. A shift has taken place. God's righteousness is not going to be revealed through law-keeping, through rules-keeping. A new covenant has been ushered in. This word righteousness here means a right standing with God. What does it look like to have a right relationship with God? To be made right with God. So Paul says, to be made right with God, to experience the righteousness of God, it is apart from rule keeping. In the past, it's been about keeping the rules, but now, the saving righteousness of God is distinct from law abiding. Look at 22. The righteousness of God, again, so this right standing with God, comes how? Through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe. So this saving righteousness of God is available through faith in Jesus Christ for those who believe. And here's the catch. It is not based on anything we do. It is not based on anything that we do. It is not performance driven. It is not good behavior driven. It is not good choices driven. Paul says the righteousness of God, but now, has been set apart from rule keeping, from law abiding. The righteousness of God is not about keeping the rules. It's not about performance. There's something new that has been ushered in. That is not performance driven. It is by placing our faith in a person, in Jesus Christ. Now, let me hit the pause button here to say this. This is different from every other world religion on the planet. Every world religion says the way to God is that we do something to earn God's favor. We do something to pick ourselves up, to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and make ourselves acceptable to God. Every world religion says, outside of Christianity, that there's a way to earn the favor of whatever deity bears the name that religion calls it. That there's a way to pray enough, to work hard enough, to do enough, to please your deity enough, where you will earn their favor. Paul flips the script on that, and he says there's nothing we can do. This is apart from law keeping. This is not performance driven. There is nothing you can do to earn this right standing with God. Go to 23. For all have sinned. There is no distinction. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So check this out. In this new system that's been ushered in Jesus, in this new system, it does not matter who the good and the not so good performers are. There is no distinction. We have all sinned and fall short of the mark of God's glory. All have sinned. Everyone is equaled. This word sinned here is a tense that we don't have in our English. It's called the perfect tense in the original. What that means is something has happened in the past that continues to impact the current, the present. That something has happened that continues to influence and impact now. What that means is at some point you have sinned. This word means to miss the mark. You have missed the mark of what it means to be acceptable to God, and as a result, you can't measure up to God's perfect standard. All have sinned and fall short of God's Mark. Let me illustrate it for you this way. We've just ended March Madness, and so we'll use a basketball illustration. Let's say that we're going to have a free throw shooting competition. And the goal of the free throw shooting competition is that you have to shoot 10 free throws, and you have to make all 10, 100%. You can't miss any free throws. The goal of the competition is to go 10 for 10 from the free throw line. So let's say we've got a few people that claim to play basketball in the church. I won't call any by name. But let's say that in this free throw shooting competition that we all line up, and the better basketball players line up, and the people that can barely shoot a basketball all line up, and we all start. And let's just say the best basketball player in the room goes first. It's not Zach. Don't pretend it's Zach. The best basketball player in the room goes first. And he dribbles, and he shoots, and he misses. First shot, misses. So he can't go 100%, can't go 10 for 10. Let's say the worst basketball player lines up and shoots and doesn't even hit the rim, shoots it, way off to the right and almost hits someone in the head, whatever the worst free throw shooter you can imagine does. So they're out of the competition. Both have been eliminated. Now, it doesn't matter if the best free throw shooter shoots 90% from the line, which is an incredible statistic in basketball. It doesn't matter if they shoot 80% or 70%. It doesn't matter if the worst free throw shooter shoots 1% from the free throw line. In that moment, they have both been eliminated from the free throw competition because they both fell short of the mark, which was 10 for 10, 100%. So it doesn't matter if you're a 20% shooter or an 80% shooter. In this competition, where you have to go 100% from the line, you both fall short. Are you seeing the illustration here? It does not matter in this life if you consider yourself a somewhat good person, a better person than your neighbor down the street who has all the problems, a better person than that coworker who's going through all that stuff, and you kind of look at yourself like, well, I got it better off than them, or I'm a better behavior, I don't do this, or I don't cheat on this, or I don't watch this, or I don't go here, and you think you're a somewhat good person. According to God's mark, if we have sinned, we are all on the same playing field. We have all sinned. So it doesn't matter morally if you're a 90% shooter or a 10% shooter, you have fallen short of God's mark. That's why we need the gospel. Doesn't matter who's the best or worst. We have both missed the mark. So look at 24. We have all sinned, we've all fallen short of God's glory, and are justified. Again, that means to be made right with God. We are justified by His grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. So here's what Paul's saying in 24. We are all guilty, all have sinned, and we are all declared right with God, justified as a free gift of God's grace through the redemption provided by Jesus. Here's what that means. It cannot be earned. It cannot be deserved. It is a free gift provided by God. Did you know that to try and earn and deserve a gift goes against the very nature of the gift itself? To try and earn it, to try and deserve it in some way, goes against the very idea of it being a gift. That gifts are free and they're purchased by someone else. You can't earn it. You can't deserve it. You can't work for it. It is a gift. Paul uses the word redemption here. It's the idea of ransom, that a price has been paid. An exchange has been made. If I go into a store and exchange a coupon, give it to the clerk, that means that I'm supposed to get $1 off, or I get this for this, or buy one, get one free. I give them something, I get something in return. The word in the original language has to do with the idea of a price that is set to set a slave free, to redeem a slave, to set a slave free. That we receive the free gift of grace because it cost God everything. That we receive the free gift because He paid the price. We go free. He pays the price. If you're a parent, you get this. You get this concept. We took a family day this past Friday and went down to the Birmingham Zoo, all 6 of us, and hung out there for a date. But guess what? Only one person went up to the window and paid for all 6 of us to get into the zoo. By the way, I said, since when does it cost $100 for 6 people to get into the zoo? Are you kidding me? It's animals you can't even see. Anyways, it's all grace. But only one person paid the price, and all 6 went in free with a heart of gratitude and thankfulness to their dad. We all went out to eat afterwards, and we all ate, and the bill came, and only one person was responsible for the bill. Well, I should actually say 2 people, because we did use a gift card that a gracious person in City Church gave us. And so 2 people were responsible for this bill, the person that gave the gift card, and then I was responsible for the balance. But all of the family ate, free to them, but it cost someone something, right? Every year at Christmas, we have gifts under our tree that are purchased by someone, and the very nature of it being a Christmas gift is I want my kids to open the gifts and to love what they got and appreciate what they got, but I don't want them to have to earn it or deserve it. I don't want to say like, hey, before we open the Christmas gifts, I need to go and make sure your rooms are good and clean, because if they're not, you're not getting any gifts from me. Like, that goes against the very nature of a gift. Some of you parent that way. I do at times. We have the gratitude talk regularly. But the way a gift functions, right, is that someone pays the price and the receiver gets it for free. So look at chapter 3, 25, the very first part of this. Whom God, again talking about Jesus, whom God put forward as a propitiation. Again, that's the idea of it took God's wrath, appeased God's wrath, by his blood to be received by faith. Here's the gospel. God paid the required price. God paid the price. The Father sent the Son, Jesus, as a sacrifice to satisfy, to appease his wrath, and to cover, there's the idea of propitiation, to cover our sin with his blood. And this gift is made available freely to us through Christ by faith. That's the gospel. Now, I want to hit the pause button here and ask an extremely important question. Why is this even necessary? Like, why couldn't God just forgive? If God is all powerful, if God is all loving, why did Jesus have to suffer and die? Like, wasn't there an alternative? Like, here's the struggle in that. Like, we don't have to die to forgive. We just simply forgive, don't we? When someone hurts us, we can choose to forgive. To simply forgive. It's not always simple, but you know what I'm saying. We just choose to forgive. It happens in everyday life. Even when the hurt runs deep, people just choose to forgive. So why did Jesus have to die? Why couldn't God just forgive us? And if we're being intellectually honest about this, we even take it a step further and said, like, what kind of father comes up with this plan? Like, what kind of father demands the sacrificial death of his innocent son? Why not just forgive? After all, he is God. He can do whatever he wants. So why did Jesus have to die? We see all the time in the media, on talk shows, people who forgive unbelievable hurts. Like, just watch Oprah for a week, and you're going to see, like, extreme forgiveness. You're going to see people that forgive, who've had their children murdered, who have been raped, who have had a close loved one murdered. Like, you'll see people that offer radical, extreme forgiveness. And so, again, if we're kind of being honest here, why couldn't God just forgive like that? Why did it require the death of his son? I'm so glad you asked that, because Paul answers that very thing. Look what Paul says in the rest of 25. This was to show God's righteousness, because in his divine forbearance he has passed over the former sins. Here's Paul's answer to that question. It was to demonstrate, to reveal, to show God's righteousness, his justice, that God in his very nature is just. And so we hear that, we're like, then why does this happen? Why do these bad things happen? Why do these innocent people suffer? Why do kids die from cancer? Why do natural disasters wipe out hundreds of thousands of people? Like, if God is just, why do these things happen? And so it's almost like, God, you need to prove yourself. And so let me go there. When there's pure justice, someone has to pay. Like, true justice does not just let people off the hook. That's not justice. Like, we kind of have that ingrained in us, don't we? Like, we have it ingrained in us if something really bad happens and someone needs to pay for that. Like, if somebody walks up in your house and walks out with your TV, you're like, man, that's not fair. I need a new TV, or that person needs to pay for that. I mean, you multiply that by 1 billion if someone walks up out with your kid. Someone needs to pay. There's something innate within us, a demand for justice. True justice does not just let people off. There's a penalty, a price to be paid. And so here's what Paul says. Follow him here. For years, God patiently postponed the penalty. When Adam and Eve sinned, the sentence of death entered the picture. We know that story. If you've been around church or the Bible at all, you know that opening story. That God said to Adam and Eve, don't eat from this tree. Eat from any tree in this huge, magnanimous garden, but do not eat from this tree. If you eat from this tree, you will what? Die. You'll die. And Adam and Eve said, well, I want to be like God. And that fruit looks good to me. Like, give me the fruit. And the apple, man, apple's taken a bad rap for centuries, right? We don't know it's an apple, but like apple always gets the blame. I think it was some other fruit. But anyways, if you eat, you're going to die. We like fruit. We want to be like God. We're going to eat. Now, here's the question. When they ate from the fruit, did they die? No, they kept living. They kept living. They were still alive. God delayed the punishment. He postponed his justice. Where's the justice? There's no immediate penalty. And here's the key. Because of his mercy, God waits. He has forbearance. That word means divine restraint. He waits. Again, I refer to parents here. He doesn't wait in a wait till you get home kind of way either, does he? How many of you used that line before? All right, we're in Target right now, but you wait till we get home. So when I was kind of a mischievous preteen, 10, 11, 12 years old, the church that my dad pastored was 1.5 miles from our house across this open field. And I would give my mom, who literally is, they'll be here next week, but my mom is 4'11", and I don't know if she's triple digits, honestly. She's like tiny, under 100 pounds. So well, you know what that means practically. From the time I was like 8 years old on, my mom could not spank me in a way that would hurt me. It's like, what are you doing back there? Stop. My dad is 6'4". Okay? So my mom would say, you wait until what? Your dad gets home. And I knew that my dad was coming home back in the early 80s because he owned a Chevy Chevette that was missing a muffler. So you know what happened at the church when my dad was coming home? Whop, up, 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 up. I could hear that car start. I'm in the South. I could hear that car crank all the way 1.5 miles away. Aren't you proud of me? I threw out that southern word for you guys, crank. 1.5 miles away across an open field. Some of you didn't even realize that's a southern word till right now. Across that open field, I would hear that car start, and I would be like, oh no, Dad is on the way home. Divine restraint is about to be removed. Forbearance has reached its limit. So this is not in a wait till you get home kind of way. What Paul is saying is God in his mercy waits. Yet because of his justice, because of his righteousness, a price still has to be paid. Because justice just does not let people off the hook. But God in His patience waited. In His mercy, He waits. He postpones. But eventually, someone has to pay in order to demonstrate the justice of God, to validate His verdict on sin, which is if you sin, you die. For the wages of sin is death. But God in His mercy waits. But in His justice, right, sin has to be paid for. And that's where grace enters the picture. Because God is just, someone has to die. But because God is a God of grace, He provides the substitute. A sinless sacrifice that Jesus dies on our behalf. You ever doubt God's justice? You ever say, why does this happen? Or why do those things happen? Like, the only way that at times those things even begin to make sense is we look to the cross. Because it is in the cross that divine justice and divine grace come together. That God says, I will take the brokenness, I will take the sin, and I will place it upon Jesus. If there is no cross, there is no justice. Those things don't make sense, but because of the cross, I can say, I don't get it now, it's a head scratcher now, but one day I know that justice will prevail, that grace will prevail. And then look how Paul brings this beautiful passage together in verse 26. It was to show His righteousness at the present time, so that He might, get this, be both just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. To be both just and the justifier. The one who makes people right. The one who justifies us in our sin. So here's the statement. His justice required payment. It doesn't just let people off the hook. There's a penalty to be paid. His justice demands payment. His mercy delays the payment, postpones the payment. Adam and Eve didn't die in the moment. We don't die in the moment when we sin. His mercy delays the payment. And then here's the bottom line, the gospel. His grace provides the payment. His justice demands it. His mercy postpones it. And then His grace delivers it. All right, so if I'm going like all alliteration preacher right now, His justice demanded payment. His mercy delayed payment. His grace delivered payment. Can I get an amen on that? Like those 3 big D's right there, right? Demanded, delayed, delivered. He justifies. He makes right the very ones that are condemned by His justice. The very ones that sinned against Him. He justifies them. Because He is both just and the justifier. So let's take it this direction. Here's the question. Are my sins so bad that they deserve death? Much less eternal death. We wrestle with this. Like my sins are not even bad enough, like most of us, my sins are not even bad enough to put me in jail. Like how can they be worthy of eternal damnation? Because we kind of have this mindset, I'm not that bad of a person. I'm kind of a good person. Like, why do good people and moral people go to hell? And here's the struggle. The struggle is our inability to grasp the magnitude of God's holiness, and that leaves us in a place where we can't even begin to comprehend the seriousness of our sin. Because we don't even begin to comprehend how holy and pure God is. And so we can't even begin to wrap our minds around how sinful we are. So we kind of excuse ourselves and make ourselves feel good and think, well, I'm not that bad of a person. It's because we can't even grasp how holy God is. That even one sin against a holy, pure God is deserving of eternal separation from God. And so we fail to recognize because our tendency is to compare ourselves. I'm kind of a good person compared to that person. I'm a better person, right? So we kind of have these scales in our mind that if somehow our goodness outweighs our badness, then we're going to be okay. And as long as I'm staying on this side, and as long as I can think about 10 other people that I'm better than, then I'm okay. That's how we think. We tend to compare ourselves. I'm on the good side of the scale. We have a flawed perspective of sin in relation to God's holiness. And I can't even begin to lay this out biblically and theologically. I think the best way to do it is, this is the simplest illustration, but when I've taught this passage before, it seems to resonate with people. So, and I know you guys think I pick on him a lot, but he's the subject of this illustration and has been because he committed the sin. It wasn't a sin, it was an act against Dad. When Zach was just a toddler kid, you all knew I was going to say Zach, didn't you? When Zach was a toddler boy, 3 years old or less, we had moved into a new home that required some painting. And so I was painting the walls. In the middle of painting the walls, I got an important phone call, so I needed to take it in another room. So I did what any good parents did. I said, hey, Zach, watch TV while I'm going to go into this other room and take this call. And so I go into the other room to take a call that ends up being a much longer call than I anticipated, leaving a toddler boy in the room, in my mind, watching TV with a paint roller and paint. Not a great dad move. And so after a 20-minute-ish, and I noticed he was kind of quiet like halfway through the call, and I was like, oh, he's so engrossed in the TV, like, I've got the greatest kid on the planet. Total silence in the other room, which was not his nature as a toddler. So I kind of should have had the check in my spirit, like total quiet's not a good thing, but I didn't. And so I was on the call, consumed with the call, and I go back into the room, and Zach's decided that not only could he help paint the wall, but we had literally, within the previous month, bought a brand new leather couch. And Zach decided that the couch needed the wall paint too. And so he took that roller with wet paint and painted our entire leather couch. And I walk in and see this. And so, I mean, in that moment as a parent, there's no way to even, like, what do I do? Like, he doesn't even begin to grasp what he does. He's a toddler. Like, I can't snatch him up and just beat the fire out of him. Well, I got all these phrases coming out of me today, like, beat the fire out of him. I didn't say fire. I was like, far, beat the fire out of him. Like, everything in me wanted to do that, but I realized, like, he can't even begin to understand what he's done because he's a toddler and he can't even begin to grasp it. And so here I found myself as a parent trying to figure out how to explain to a toddler why he shouldn't do it. And so I couldn't, like, say, hey, Zach, like, you shouldn't do that because it costs so much money. Like, he's got no concept of money. He's got no concept of value. He doesn't know what it means to have a job. He didn't think anything. He doesn't know what to do about it. I couldn't explain to him, like, here's the stuff we're going to have to buy to try to get this paint off. And we're going to have to go and get paint thinner and then try to apply that. And then to recover the leather somehow with a leather rejuvenator. Like, having that type of conversation with a 2-year-old would have been pointless. He would not even have begun to understand what I was saying. So here I was in my mind trying to think, how do I explain to a toddler in this moment the severity of what he's done? He can't understand value. He can't understand cost. He can't understand how much work would be involved. He can't understand anything about why this was such a bad idea. The only thing that I could say to him was, Zach, don't do this. I forgive you. I love you. This is wrong. Just don't do it. That's all I could say to him in that moment. He couldn't understand anything else. And I think that illustration kind of helps me understand the magnitude of God, of our sin in light of God's holiness. To begin to even try to comprehend how offensive our sin is to the holiness of God is impossible. We can't pay the price. We can't do anything about it. So it's almost as if God the Father pays and forgives and then says to us, like, just don't do it. There's freedom in not doing it. Like, just don't go that direction. Just don't sin. Just don't live that way. Because there's freedom. Like, you're not going to grasp the magnitude, the difference between holiness and sin. You're not going to wrap your minds around it. We can't even begin to comprehend it. We're toddlers. And yet God pays the price. And He echoes through eternity, you are forgiven. Just don't do it. His mercy postpones. His justice demands price. His grace pays the price. Someone had to die the death that I deserve to die, so that I might be made right with God. Let me tell you the gospel right here. You are a wretched sinner. You're a wretched sinner. Paul just says in 3 chapters, you are a wretched sinner. You are guilty. You are condemned. It doesn't matter how religious you think you are, how irreligious you are. It doesn't matter what you think you know about the Bible or don't know about the Bible. You are a wretch, Paul says. And by the way, he says, I'm a wretch too. Oh, how wretched man I am, Paul says. You're a wretch. You are guilty. You are condemned. You are not deserving of grace. You can't earn it. You can't deserve it. You know what? You're a wretch. You're a sinner. I'm one too. You are all equal before God. All have sinned. All are equal before God. We have all fallen short of God's standard. You are a wretched sinner, guilty and condemned. But now, did you hear me? But now, Paul says, you are declared righteous. You're a wretch. You're a sinner. But now you have been declared righteous. And what that means is there is no penalty for your sin. You are righteous in His sight. Live like it. You're a wretch, but now you have been declared righteous by God. He doesn't even say, I made you righteous, does He? He says, I have declared you righteous. You're not righteous, but I have declared you righteous. I have made you righteous in Jesus. So here's what I tell you. Live like it. Live like it. Live like a righteous person. Like, how dare we think that we can try and earn it? How dare we think we can be good enough? How dare we think that we can somehow earn God's favor? How dare we think that we're somehow better than the guy down the street from us? How dare we think that we are better off because that's not our sin and that's their sin? How dare we think that we're in a better moral place than anyone and everyone around us outside of Jesus? It goes against the very nature of what God has done for you. You are not enough. You are a wretch. You are a sinner. You are condemned. But now in Jesus, you have been declared right before Him. No penalty for my sin. I am righteous in His sight. We didn't earn it. We didn't deserve it. But the price has been paid for our sin. You are justified, Paul says. 2 words, 2 small words that mean absolutely everything. You are guilty. You are condemned. You are a wretch. But now, in Jesus, you have been made right with Him. You have been declared righteous in His sight. Stop trying to earn it and live it.